Well, President Obama seems to be hitting the repeat button on his line about phony scandals in his weekly radio address yesterday. He once again said the Republicans are drumming up all these fake controversies to avert attention from the economy. Take a listen.
Too often over the past 2 years, Washington has taken its eye off the ball. They've allowed an endless parade of political posturing and phony scandals to distract from growing our economy and strengthening the middle class.
He said that about 10,000 times in the last 2 weeks. Let's bring in our political insiders. John LeBoutillier, former Republican congressman for New York. Pat Caddell, Fox News contributor and a former pollster for President Jimmy Carter. Doug Schoen is also a Fox News contributor and a former pollster for Bill Clinton. He joins us live in our Los Angeles bureau. So, Doug, let me start with you. Intel Chief Clapper apologizes for lying about the NSA program. The IRS lies about the program, admits wrongdoing, apologizes, lies again, and gets caught. And, of course, Benghazi is a bit of a mess. But these are somehow phony?
Well, this is classic distraction, Greg. We have an economy that is having tepid economic growth, tepid growth in and of itself, and the labor market participation is relatively low. So the Obama administration has got a modest case to make on the economy. The scandals are very, very serious. We'll talk about them today, I think, in great detail, particularly Pat Caddell. But bottom line, you have dysfunctionality also in Washington. The only asset that the president really has is Republican disarray. They are totally divided on the budget. And the president is basically doing a divide and conquer strategy to take modest credit for modest gain, but to blame the Republicans, try to demonize them, and above all else, turn away from the so-called phony scandals.
All right, let me play a clip from the White House Press Secretary Jay Carney, because this would appear to be a sort of constant theme within the White House. Scandals. What scandals? Take a listen.
What we've seen as time has passed and more facts have become known, whether it's about the attacks in Benghazi and the talking points, or revelations about conduct at the IRS, that attempts to turn this into a scandal have failed.
What about that, Pat?
Well, other than him being about the most disingenuous person ever stand on that podium, let me tell you, we face a crisis in American democracy of proportions none of us have ever seen in terms of these widespread scandals of government abuse. And the real problem is that for the first time in American history, you have the party in power, the party out of power, and the news media, all who either are co-conspirators, accessories, or accomplices, or AWOL from all of this, or purposely AWOL, and therefore no one in this country is telling the American people the danger of what's happening, and that Washington, and this is a Washington elite scandal, that the enemy of the American people, their enemy is you, the American people, and that's the real story here.
Congressman?
Well, you know what upsets me the most in all of it? I expect the worst out of this administration. I expect the worst as a conservative out of any administration. It's the other party that needs to check and balance the party in the White House. And the Republicans have dropped the ball. What Pat just said is 1,000% correct. They are really complicit in covering up Benghazi. Boehner refuses to name a select committee, even though a majority of Republicans in the House have written to him. Frank Wolf, very good congressman from Virginia, has told the Speaker, if you won't name a select committee, you are complicit in the cover-up. And what we now suspect is Boehner won't do it, and maybe he used that as leverage on the president to get this ridiculous fix of Obamacare so that we are paying for the health care of Capitol Hill staffers and congressmen. It's like a payoff for keeping quiet on Benghazi.
All right, let me pick up on what you just said on Obamacare and go to Doug Schoen. You know, the president said there's really no need to follow the law here. He's handing out delays. He's handing out exemptions, about 2,000 plus waivers to, you know, his supporters and unions and so forth. Is that a measure, do you think, Doug, of executive arrogance?
Than arrogance. I think it is creeping government authoritarianism. What Pat and John are talking about is absolutely right. But when the president says, as he said repeatedly, if I don't like what Congress is doing, I'll do it myself, he is basically eviscerating the traditional checks and balances that have been the hallmark of our system. What you're pointing to is an example of a law that is unpopular, where the president is basically making law as he goes along. It's outrageous behavior. And as I said, the only thing that is really working to his advantage is the Republican opposition now is in such disarray. They're having a civil war over the budget. They can't get together. They're fighting with one another over immigration, the budget, foreign policy. Bottom line, that's the president's only ally. But this is an administration that is increasingly making its own law, ruling on its own basis, and acting against the American people.
Pat, is there also legislative arrogance because Congress has the temerity to grant itself an exemption from Obamacare costs while Americans every day are getting hit with premium shock?
They do this every day. But we need to understand where the other part of the legislative crisis is. The Benghazi, which you mentioned, the scandal about Benghazi. Let's start with that, where we have John Boehner, who has been purposely suppressing anything on Benghazi because he knew what we found out this week, and he had approved it. These sales, these CIA teams on the ground, which were sending weapons from Libya through Turkey to Syrian rebels without congressional approval. And what we have is we find out, and by the way, remember, no one has still been arrested in this. We have a president who has suppressed the truth in administration. We have John Brennan, who left the White House, went to the CIA, and what is the CIA doing? They are polygraphing every member of the people who are on the ground there, keeping them from telling the Congress the truth, and the Congress won't act in its own defense.
That's the thing. Why won't the Congress want to get at the truth of this thing? We used to say 4 people were dead, the ambassador and 3 other people. We now learn this week that there were other people injured. 36 CIA personnel evacuated right away during the attack.
Fox News learning that some of them are being told to clam up by the administration,
or else
signing non-disclosure agreements.
Yeah. So what does that
Never
smell like?
in the
That's
history
cover-up of something. And the public has a right to know. I really think, I don't want to sound like we need a million committees, but we need 2 committees. We need the Benghazi Select Committee, and we need another one on the abuse of executive power that goes into the IRS, which is a growing scandal. We've now, Pat can trace it right into the White House counsel's office in 2010. Bob Bauer, the White House counsel then, married to Anita Dunn, one of the Obama insiders. And they're having meetings with the head of the IRS in the White House the day before they target the president in the Roosevelt room.
And other people, and we don't know, but Bob Bauer is the name. He was a counsel. He comes in. He is the person, 2008, this week we found out, who went to the FEC. The FEC Republican members issued a harsh memo this week saying the staff on its own, guess who they went to? Guess who was on the staff? Lois Lane Lerner was there to help them pursue Obama's enemies. I guarantee you this stuff goes directly
Greg, it's not just, I'm sorry.
Directly into the White House and members of the White House staff.
Somebody here is fired up.
Pat, are you exercised over this thing?
Yes, I'm
Are you a Democrat?
Yes.
So you're exercised over phony scandals. Why aren't the Republicans half
Because you know what?
off?
It's about the country, and they don't put the country.
Let me squeeze in a little bit about the IRS with Doug Schoen. You know, the president promised, Doug, to get to the bottom of this thing. And yet now we're learning that the IRS is accused of stonewalling and redacting documents that Congress is requesting. And people, of course, are clamming up, taking the fifth. Is that a legitimate, serious scandal, even though the president says it's phony?
Oh, of course it's serious. I mean, it began with the administration denying it was a scandal. Then there was outrage. Then it was low-level employees. This week we saw Danny Werfel tell Darrell Issa, bottom line, I prioritize what documents I give you. We're doing it at our own pace, our own way, and we'll get to them. So it's pretty outrageous, Greg.
Well, what's outrageous is that Pat needs to try decaf, okay? Because he's really exercised over this.
Sorry, I think every American should be.
All right, we're going to be right back with